Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers. We're here to talk Seahawks football. We've got a good show for you to plan today. Our continuing series looking at position groups on the roster. We've reached the wide receivers. Pretty fun group to talk about. It's kind of a rebuilt group. I think the debate will be, did we add to the room or subtract from the room? I think we did both, but are we better? Are we worse? Are we somewhere in between? Let's talk about it and kind of figure it out. Keith, welcome in.
There's a lot here. I mean, in some ways they are worse, and in other ways they're better. And I don't think that this is a simple question. I think it's more about like the nuance of all of it in order for it to make sense.
No, absolutely. I agree. And we'll talk about all the players and so forth, but I did want to make one announcement. It's a little old news for those of you that keep current on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. But Seahawks signed Michael Dickson to a 4-year extension today, $16.2 million total value, makes him the highest paid punter in the league. He was once that on his last contract. He got passed over quite a few different times, but now back in the number one spot. Good for him. Good for the Seahawks. Provides some continuity there. When you don't have to talk about anything that he's doing, that's a good thing, although he deserves the recognition for sure. Solid, if not spectacular at times, and kind of a fun guy. And I'm okay with that extension, even though it makes him the highest paid. When you consider all the other position groups and how much everyone else makes, I'm okay with him making $4 million a year or whatever it is.
Well, he's the highest paid punter. He's also the best punter in the league. And I think that, sometimes you have to pay for quality. And it's weird to pay a punter because you don't think of it as a value position. Do they really affect wins and losses that much? Sometimes they do. And, the ability to flip the field and field position and just some of the things he brings to the table are worth paying a little more for. And as the best punter in the game, he's going to make the most money. So it works.
Yeah. And he's signed through the 2029 season, which kind of puts him into a shot to hold a lot of the records that will be, franchise records, which is good for him. And it's, to have a punter on your team to reach a third contract, it's a big deal. These guys will give him a hard time probably on the team, but he deserves it at the end of the day. And I agree with everything he said. So, all right.
I haven't looked. So who does hold all the team records? Is it John Ryan or
John Ryan or Tootin?
Or Rick Tootin? Yeah, that was the other one.
Tootin, I think, was with the team, I'm going to say at least 10 years. Could be wrong, off memory, but it seems like it's around that. Yeah. And John Ryan, he was probably with the team at least 8, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Seems about right. So this will put Michael Dickson with the team for 10 or 11 years if he completes his contract. That's crazy. That's a long time in the NFL to be with one team. It just doesn't happen very often anymore. Okay, so among the other significant moves that the Seahawks made this offseason, they moved off of DK Metcalf, traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a nice little draft pick. And then Tyler Lockett was released, salary cap move, essentially, kind of aged out of his contract versus the value that he was bringing back in. One could definitely argue he would have been a great piece to have come back on a smaller deal. Even the deal that he made with Pittsburgh, I thought was somewhat reasonable and would have added to this room a little bit. But there would have been a lot of duplication at the position. And so I don't mind that the team moved off. It's awfully hard to move off of a, fan favorite
Everybody loves Tyler Lockett, and rightfully so.
Dedicated to the team, dedicated to his craft. Just all around good guy for sure. And that's always tough, but that's who we moved off of, Keith. You can talk about that for a second, but who did we move on to?
So we moved off Tyler Lockett, and kind of replacing him in that role is Marquez Valdez-Scantling, a younger Tyler Lockett. I mean, very similar players, speed, deep threat, but that's not where you're going to see them used most. They're going to be used in the slot underneath, that kind of stuff. The differences is Tyler Lockett has a much longer track record of production. Now, that production has decreased in each of the last 3 years, but the production was still there, and he's not that old. But the age was showing. Scantling's younger. He appears to have some untapped potential. We'll see. And yeah, I mean, it's an interesting combination there. Was that a move that made them better? I don't know, but it certainly made them cheaper, and saved them a lot of salary cap room when they needed it.
Yeah. Yeah. Regarding Tyler Lockett, moving off of him, he had 45 receptions last year, 600 yards, etc. I mean, those were outpacing Valdez-Scantling. Now, I will say this: Scantling is 30 years old, so he's not too much younger than Tyler Lockett. 31 in October. He played 8 games last year with New Orleans, a couple games with the Bills, 17 receptions, 385 yards, a 22.6 average, which is outstanding to stretch the field. That's where I think he differentiates a little bit with Lockett, at least where Lockett was when he left. So he's more of a stretch the field guy and used in that capacity. He had 4 touchdowns. In his past life, though, Keith, he was pretty productive with Green Bay. So Green Bay drafted him. He was 5th round pick, 2018. Pretty productive. And we're talking like 23 to 30 reception, 400 to 500 yards, 4 to 5 touchdowns for 3 or 4 years. Ended up going to the Bills, was productive for a season there, got hurt a little bit. Only played in 2 games last year, then was flipped to New Orleans. And then 8 games with New Orleans.
I played a couple years in Kansas City as well.
Yes, Kansas City. That's when I was forgetting.
Yeah, he was the guy who was he didn't replace Tyreek Hill, but he kind of gave them something that gave them the deep threat to allow everyone else to continue to do what they did. And had a good year with Kansas City in his first year there, but then his production really dropped off after that. And it was more had to do with just losing out on his role. He didn't really have much of a role with that team other than running deep when he got on the field.
I think if you look at his career averages, I think that's exactly what we could probably expect here. And it's not bad. It's just not huge. I think Seattle could expect 30 receptions, maybe 35, depending on how much we pass the ball, 500 yards, 4 or 5 touchdowns. That's kind of where he's going to be. That's where he's been his entire career when he's been healthy and played an entire season. And I expect similar numbers here in Seattle. There's no reason to expect that he's going to grossly outperform that and have some sort of 800 yard, 45, 50 reception season with, 10 touchdowns. That seems unrealistic to me. And that's probably
his best year was 42 receptions for 687 yards. He had a year where he had 6 touchdowns, but usually it's 2 to 3. Yes. 2024 he had 4. But yeah, I mean he's not been.
Those are 4th wide receiver numbers. I'll be completely honest.
He's not a featured guy, but he's a guy that 4th or 3rd, depending on the team and the roster and all of that kind of stuff. But he comes in, He comes in and he replaces Lockett. Lockett had better numbers than him last year. They had, but he also played on two teams. There was that. And you have to think that if Lockett's numbers decreased, even though the team never threw the ball, never ran the ball, they just only threw it, and his numbers still went down, they're probably going to go down again this year. And so they're probably going to drop into that range where it was about where Valdez Scantling's numbers are as far as yards and stuff. And to do that for 1/7 of the price, it makes it you have to make those trades sometimes, even if you don't want to see a guy like Lockett leave, because like I said, everyone loves Tyler Lockett. I mean, he's just such a good guy in the locker room and been such a huge part of Seattle and this team for so long.
So I'm curious as to why you kind of compare him to Lockett when we also acquired Cooper Kupp, who has a similar skill set as Tyler Lockett as well. We did lose DK Metcalf. He was more of the kind of the bigger stretch the field guy. Scantling 6'2", 215 or whatever. I thought maybe he would be looked at as more of a DK Metcalf guy, even though he wouldn't comp to him in anybody's idea of what a receiver is. But they would play similar positions on the field, I would think.
Well, the reason why I comped him to Lockett is role, that they're going to be the third or fourth wide receiver. And so that's kind of where I looked at that. Whereas Cooper Kupp is going to come in and probably be the number 2, at least when he's healthy, at least at the beginning. And so that's where DK Metcalf was production wise. He was the number 1 in terms of what defenses did, but for number 2, he was the number 2 production wise. So, and I feel that's where Kupp's going to be. So that's why I comped him to Lockett and not Kupp.
Okay. So before we talk to our number one wide receiver, let's talk about Cooper Kupp and the acquisition of him. 32 years old in this season, 8 seasons with the Rams, 6 very productive seasons, trailed off the last couple seasons with injuries and just different utilization rates within their offense. What can people expect from Cooper Kupp other than the intangible stuff? And we can talk about that. And it's kind of off the chart type stuff. Like, I really like him as in all of that aspect, but on the field, what can we expect?
Cooper Kupp is 6'2", but he plays bigger. He is so smooth in and out of his breaks. He gets separation. He finds soft spots and zones. He's a guy that's like a safety valve. He's always open. He's not a stretch to the field guy, but everything else in his game, he does really, really well. There's a reason why he was the Triple Crown winner a couple of years ago with receptions, yards, and touchdowns, leading the entire league. So that was in 2021. So I guess it's more than a couple of years ago. But yeah, he's had three years since then where he's been injury plagued, playing 9, 12, and 12 games the last 3 seasons since that one monster season. But when he's healthy, he's a guy that teams have to account for, and because he's so productive, and there are guys that outproduce their physical numbers in this league occasionally. There aren't a lot of them because a lot of them, you kind of contribute it to their height, weight, speed, agility, numbers. But Kupp's just been better than those at every moment because he's just so smooth as a runner and as a route runner. And you got to put a bigger player on him because he plays really big and tall, and those guys don't tend to move well. And he runs routes like a guy who's 5'9" in terms of his ability to make cuts and get open. So, yeah, I mean, he's fun to watch. And I hate to say that because he's played his entire career with the Rams, but now he's a Seahawk, so I can admit it. He's fun to watch. He's just a really good player at his position.
So there's three things that I would add to that. The three things that come to my mind with him are that he's very crafty, and you can tie that into the route running, but he's just a crafty guy. And the reason that he has to be and be successful in the NFL is because he's not a speed guy. He's a 4.5 40 guy. Not a tremendous straight line speed player, but you mentioned getting out of breaks, confusing defensive backs, gaining any separation that he can with the lack of speed that he just doesn't have is pretty cool. And then his contested catch rate, because of his physicality, is second to none, I think, in the NFL. Like, he goes and gets the ball. He's very tenacious and physical. That physicality leads into my next point, which is that he's a great blocker. He's probably one of the best blocking wide receivers in the league, which is, I believe, why Seattle ultimately went out and got this player, because he's a perfect fit in this scheme, as shown by how he's used with the Rams. Sean McVay, this is a similar system with the same roots, and it does ask their wide receivers to play an important role in the run game, and for other receivers to kind of to get other receivers open and so forth. The other thing is the intangibles that I mentioned before. The guy is just a born leader. He goes into the wide receiver room and automatically, even Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's accomplished himself, will listen to him. And so a lot of respect there. He works his ass off in practice, so he shows it by example. All the things that you would want out of a player, he brings to the team, and so he really adds to that wide receiver room quite a bit in those respects. So good player. As far as the production, if he was to play 17 games, he's probably a 75 1007 guy. 75 receptions, 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns. That's if he played all 17 games. My feeling is, based on the last 3 years, he did that in
2022 in just 9 games.
Wow.
75 receptions. It was 812 yards, but it was 75 receptions and 6 touchdowns.
Wow.
In just 9 games. And that was, 4
years ago.
2022.
3 years ago. Yeah. Crazy.
So 2023, it was way down. It was 59, 740 and 5, but 5's still good.
That's what I'm thinking we're going to get, Keith. I'm thinking, okay, if he can give us 12 healthy games, maybe a couple other bonus ones, but 12 really healthy games, he, plays the entire game. He's going to give you probably 60 receptions, 750 yards, 5 to 6 touchdowns. And I think that's kind of where you're expecting him. Now, if we get anything more than that, that's a bonus to me.
Yeah. The real thing that Cooper Kupp needs to do, besides the leadership and all of that, is to hold down the fort long enough for the really talented rookie that they drafted, that we'll talk about in a minute, because we need to talk about JSN first.
We do need to talk about JSN.
But Cooper Kupp's job is to hold down the fort and wait for the rookie to get ready and help the rookie get ready, because that kid has the makeup, physically at least, to be special. And we'll get to there in a minute.
I don't know that anybody else is talking about this particular rookie that you're talking about in any way like what you're just describing. Doesn't make it wrong. I'm just saying, I don't think that people have really caught up to the fact that we had a really good wide receiver drafted. It was just later than expected, and because of injury and so forth. Let's talk about Njigba really quick.
Yeah, so talk about our team's number 1 receiver, the guy that deserves everybody to talk about him.
So he's amazing, right? 100 receptions last year in a bad offense, but a pass-happy offense. But I do expect his numbers, because of our efficiency on offense this year, to kind of stay about the same. 100 receptions. I think that his usage rate, his drop rate, his yards after catch, all that kind of stuff. His yards after catch actually might go up this year. But everything else is going to be, for me, stat wise, it probably looks similar year over year. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on where he's at in this scheme, along with the other receivers we have in the room? How does he fit in?
JSN will be productive in any scheme. It doesn't matter what you want him to do. He can do it. He is a really, really good player. And just, he gets open against single coverage. He's gotten open against double coverage. He's just really good at taking advantage of whatever the defense is doing and finding ways to set cornerbacks up so that way he can, make his cut, get open. He's really sure-handed. I know everyone, talks about DK Metcalf as being the number one, and defenses treated DK as the number one and double teamed him a lot and didn't with JSN. But production wise, he far surpassed anything that Metcalf did. And it's hard to argue that he wasn't the better player. I mean, he wasn't the more physical.
He's certainly the more efficient player.
Yeah, he wasn't the more physically talented player, but he was the better overall player. And, 100 receptions in a season, 57 of those went for first downs.
That's why I think, Keith, that there's an opportunity here with this particular wide receiver group to be better than they were last year. And on paper, they look, if you were a casual fan, you would say, okay, they lost Tyler Lockett, they lost DK Metcalf, they replaced him with an aging and injury-prone Cooper Kupp and Valdez-Scantling, who really hasn't
journeyman
done a lot. Mm-hmm. Right. He's going to give you something, but he's. And so what do you say to those people?
I'd say that, do you look at overall talent? Did it go down? Probably. But yeah, you got an aging Cooper Kupp, but you replaced an aging Tyler Lockett. So that doesn't change much. And as good as DK was, and as dominating as he could be, his production wasn't as high as where you'd expect it to be for, his role in the offense. And all of the immature, just kind of nonsense that you had to put up with wasn't helpful. And instead you replaced
that when he complained enough to, and asked kind of to be traded, they didn't blink an eye. They just did it.
Yeah.
Like overnight, essentially.
Yeah. And instead you gain Cooper Kupp, who's like, the textbook example of leadership at that position. And so physically, they maybe, you can't replace DK Metcalf and feel good about that. But in terms of everything, like, I don't think that it's as made as massive of a drop off as national media will have you think, because I still think that they're overestimating where Tyler Lockett is in his career, because he's not the player he used to be. And it's hard to look at DK Metcalf's season last year and not think of it as disappointing. He really didn't do what you would expect a number one receiver to do in a seriously pass happy offense.
I think that if you were to have Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf back again this year with Gino or with Sam Darnold, and in this scheme, I think they would be worse, because this scheme demands a timing offense, a precise route running tree from all of the wide receivers. We have that. Like, we're better at actual route running this year as a group, as a collective, than we have been in quite some time. I think there's an opportunity here to really technically be very sound and solid Not spectacular. JSN's going to give you some spectacular catches. Cooper Kupp's going to bring down some balls that you just can't even believe. But overall, I think that those spectacular kind of plays and so forth are limited. But the technical aspect of the position when you're trying to march down the field methodically, I think gets a little better, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be more efficient with Cooper Kupp because his ability to get first downs, and it's not everything has to be a home run and all of that. As a comparison for the two of them, do you realize that Metcalf played in 15 games and Kupp only played in 12, but yet Kupp had one more reception than DK Metcalf, 67 to 66.
What were yards per catch averages?
I was going to skip that. I was going to skip that because that doesn't make my point. I was trying to, make this look positive. In terms of touchdowns, Kupp had 6 and DK had 5 in 3 fewer games. Now, as far as DK Metcalf had more targets to get 8 more targets to get 1 fewer reception. That's not significantly different, but the receiving yards per reception, Metcalf won that 15 to 10. So he was a bigger threat. He got down the field better. He turned his receptions into big plays more often. But we were talking about moving the sticks and
what
just
was his
trying
drop rate?
to.
Do you have that?
I do, if I can find it. Cooper Kupp's drop rate was 2% versus 4% for Metcalf. So he had half as many drops, but those drop numbers are 2 drops in the entire season for Kupp and 4 in the entire season for Metcalf last year. So I'm not.
I think that's
within the air.
Somewhat comforting for most listeners to hear in that they were somewhat equal. So you can take a look at DK Metcalf's year and everyone can say, well, it wasn't spectacular, but at least it was solid and somewhat consistent. You can paint that over to Cooper Kupp pretty easily. And, and he did it in less games.
And he's going to do in less games, but for, a far smaller salary also, which in a salary cap league, that matters. I'm sorry, it does. What I'm trying to find is number of receptions for first downs. And see, this is the one where DK wins. Was that Kupp 67 receptions only resulted in 28 first downs. Whereas DK has resulted in 35. And I think that has to do with Kupp gets a lot of 6-yard receptions, 5-yard receptions. Spacing concept where it's 3 yards off the line of scrimmage.
We're going to see more of that anyway out of this scheme. It's just going to be the way the scheme is.
Yeah. And then it's part of his skill set. Where you're going to see a lot of that where he, on first down, makes a reception for 4 yards or 5 yards, brings up second down. And that's gonna be okay because you're setting yourself up for third and short, which is much more manageable and easier to connect on than, third and 10 because you threw the ball deep for an incompletion and on first down. So, with Metcalf, you got more yards and you got more explosive plays, but you didn't get more receptions and you didn't get more consistency. In fact, if anything, you got fewer receptions per game, fewer yards per game, fewer touchdowns per game. Cooper Kupp's game is about efficiency, not explosiveness. And Metcalf's is about explosiveness, not efficiency. And last year, what they desperately needed was efficiency, and they didn't have it. And that's not all DK's fault. I don't want to say that it is because would be vastly unfair to him. That had way more to do with Ryan Grubb. But still, if you want to if you want to keep your defense on the field or off the field and make other teams, defend everything and whatever, you need to convert third downs. You need to have third and short. You need to be efficient. And Cooper Kupp is efficiency.
So we have described the top 3 wide receivers on this team. Let's talk about the competition at the 4th and 5th spots, at least initially. Now we're talking about June 10th here. And we're talking about a couple players that may be able to move up into the, in the position group pecking order. We've got a couple guys that are returning in Jake Bobo and Derek Young, a couple guys on the practice squad that are going to get another shot. Let's talk about the 2 draft picks that kind of get integrated into this group. You mentioned it earlier, talking about Torrey Horton.
Yes, I didn't use the name because I was trying to not take away. We had not talked about JSN yet, and that we have to. You got to jump in and talk about the guy who's your number 1 receiver. But yes. Torrey Horton, he's 6'2", 196. He's out of Colorado State, which is part of the reason why people are, not as nobody's bandwagoning. Torrey Horton at this point, but you go look at his tape and you go look at his numbers at the combine and what he does physically. And then you start really looking at things like his catch radius and how his hands are and whatever. And the kid has a chance to be really, truly special. But he's a little raw. His route tree is pretty small that he can do well. He needs to develop a larger route tree that he can use in order to get open consistently in the NFL. And okay, that's fine. He's a rookie, right?
He's got
and he's a rookie that was taken fairly late in the draft for the quality of player he is. There was a lot of talk that he was going to go around maybe 2 rounds higher than he did. I saw him mocked at the end of round 2 a little bit. Early around 3 a lot.
I think I mocked him in a mock that we did that in round 3, and we didn't bat an eye when we talked about him.
No, and that's the kind of player that he is, at least in my opinion. You go in and look at his tape. He's a really, really good receiver who just needs developmental time to learn the game, and especially now that he's with the NFL and things go faster and the defenders are better, and he's going to take time for him to develop a route tree. So I don't expect him to do much in his first year, but I expect him to turn around a year from now and explode. And there's no reason why he couldn't. I mean, physically, there's nothing he doesn't do well.
And he returns kicks and punts too, so that'll be an opportunity for him as well.
Mm-hmm. That'll get him on the field.
Yeah. So as far as, working himself in and potentially taking over a number 3 spot by the end of the season, I think is realistic for him. And that's a great place to be, because if you take a look at our top 3, you would say, okay, Valdez-Scantling could be the weakest link on there. Could we upgrade that? Well, this is the guy that would be currently on the roster that you could say yes. If Torrey Horton works out, maybe not on day 1, but by November, he could be working and pushing for snaps on the offensive side of the ball and, land on that 3rd role heading into 2026, save free agency and draft picks and so forth. But I like the room a lot better with him in it. Like if he wasn't there and we somehow missed out on the draft or whatever, it just didn't happen, we'd probably be looking for a
wide receiver,
current free agent out there sitting out, on the market, an aging player that could come in and place hold, for a while.
Yeah. But Torrey Horton is that guy. He's the developmental project. He's the guy that you look at long term. And if Cooper Kupp gets hurt, he's a guy that might take advantage of that and get a bunch of playing time. I don't think he's the first choice to take Cooper Kupp snaps. I think he's the second choice to take Cooper Kupp snaps if Kupp gets hurt. I think the first choice is going to be Jake Bobo, because I think they're going to want to take what Cooper Kupp does well and have him teach Jake Bobo how to do those things.
That makes a lot of sense. Athletically wise, they're a very similar player.
Yeah, they're neither one of them has speed, but they have good short area stuff that they do. Bobo's bigger, he's longer, but they both play very physically. They both block extremely well for wide receivers. And I would love to see Kupp just take Bobo under his wing and say, "Hey, look, let's develop you and turn you into a better player." And I think Bobo would love that. And so I honestly think that if Kupp plays, the first 6 games and gets hurt, the guy who comes in and takes those snaps that has that role, I believe is going to be Jake Bobo.
Man, you're the first person that I've heard talk about Jake Bobo this offseason and relate it to Cooper Kupp and the mentoring opportunity and so forth. I think that's a really good point and a solid idea. Depending on how this new staff views him, obviously he's got to come in and prove it all over again. He's not like a top 3 receiver in this roster. So he's going to be looked at as being in the competition for the 4 and 5 spot. So he's going to go out and have to do his stuff, but I think he will. And I think he does comp favorably to Kupp but that'd be interesting. Now, talent wise, there's a couple other guys. Derek Young has been hanging around for a few seasons, never really completely panned out. Setback with injuries is always hard to overcome.
He's always hurt, but at 6'2", 224 with his speed, it's hard to just be like, yeah, whatever. He's a practice squad / special team guy and whatever, because he's big and he's fast. And if he could freaking stay healthy, I honestly still think there's a role for him. I know it was 2 coaching staffs ago, but Pete Carroll's last year, they put together during the offseason and the preseason, they had packages built around Derek Young where he was motioning into the backfield. They were lining him up with fullback and having him run routes out of there. And they saw a lot of potential in him and developed that. But then he got hurt and they got nothing for it. And then we had a different offensive coaching staff last year that didn't seem to want to do anything with him. And then now we got another offensive coaching staff. So we'll see. But there's something about, the fact that Pete Carroll's team wanted to find ways to get him on the field and build plays and packages around him tells you a little bit about the talent level. Because it's hard to find guys that are that big, that run that fast, because he's got elite speed.
Yeah. The other guy that has earned snaps, had a great preseason last year, was Cody White. Been sitting around the practice squad for a while. Another big physical player.
6'3", 215. He's the same age as Derek Young. Runs really well. And actually, he worked his way onto the roster just with effort. And then in his first playing time last year, had a crazy big game and was the captain the following week. And we just never heard from him again all season, which was unfortunate because Cody White's probably never going to be a star. But I'm a fan. I want to see him do good. He works so freaking hard. And guys that work as hard as him deserve opportunities. And I was really hoping he'd take advantage of that and do some great things last year. And he had one good game, but that's okay.
Yeah. So the last player, and I saved him for last because he was kind of last in the draft, Ricky White III. And if you go look at his profile, he's unspectacular. So he's like 6'1", 184, a little on the light side, runs a 4.6, 140. His agility is not great. His wingspan is 76. 10-yard split is 155 for wide receivers. Okay, but it's not special. and when you go look at him though on tape, he's a great football player. So you throw out kind of all the measurables in favor of the tape with this guy and the upside and the special teams ability. He blocked 4 kicks just last year alone. Special teams player of the year in his conference.
Yeah.
And he's got a knack for playing football and the timing of it and all the things. And it's hard to teach those things. So when you have them, you try to figure them out with a player for sure. And he's one of those guys.
Yeah.
The question will be,
I don't dislike Ricky White. I do question if anything in his game translates.
Boards, like the Torrey Horton and the Cody White big board, or the Ricky White big boards, like they're somewhat close as to
bad, but they shouldn't be.
Yeah, but all the all of the world views these guys as, and that's a good for me. That's not so much of a dig on Horton. It's a maybe Ricky White's a little better than advertised kind of a thing for me.
Ricky White's one of those guys who's going to make a living on special teams, at least early in his career. And those 4 blocked kicks last year show you why. The team is like, yep, let's get him in here, because guys that work that hard on special teams and put that much energy and effort into getting good at special teams, it's hard to find those guys, because everyone hates special teams as player. They know it's there. They know they do it. And guys know that's their route onto a roster if they're on the back end, but that's not what they want to do. Wide receivers want to go catch the football. They don't want to run down the field and tackle people. And so a guy like Ricky White that comes in and just kind of embraces special teams has a shot at the roster, because he's going to be better at it. And that's how your 6th wide receiver makes the team, is by special teams. And so I think that let's not undersell him, because that is one of the things you have to do as a back of the roster player.
So that's definitely a factor. The other factor is he's really advanced on his route running, his route tree, his route running ability, his ability to decelerate, all that kind of stuff is excellent, and beyond his draft grade. So the team is going to value that in this scheme. So that's another plus for him. The hard part for me, and it will be for you too, as we kind of wander down this road of all the prospects and figuring out where all these players are going to fit. There's only so much room, and you're carrying an extra quarterback this year and a fullback. And so they've got to figure out how many wide receivers they're going to keep and how many linemen, tight ends, etc. There just could be a situation where really good players are going to get cut. And we already know the top 3. You got Jake Bobo, you add a Torrey Horton, there's 5. I think there's a possibility this team carries 5 wide receivers on the 53. Now they're going to keep 2 or 3 on the practice squad. Can a player like Tariq Young or Ricky White or Cody White and a couple of the others get through to the practice squad?
I think most of those players can get through the practice squad. I do also think they keep a 6th with this thing. And Jake Bobo's roster spot is not set in stone. He could be beat out for that spot. I mean, the team loves him. The coaches, the past coaches have loved him. The new staff doesn't know him yet. They'll see. But what he does isn't necessarily irreplaceable, especially when you can find undrafted rookies like Tyrone Broden, who's taller, believe it or not, at 6'5" versus Bobo 6'4", and not any slower, because Bobo is not the fastest player. That's an understatement. And
I guess Tyrone Broden has showed out at the rookie camp and also mini camp.
Yeah. And so he's a guy that could come in and if he shows that he's willing to work on special teams and block well and be good at it, he's going to make about 1/3 of what Jake Bobo will. As an undrafted rookie. versus a Bobo who is, going into his third year. So you could see them making that switch if a guy like him stands out. I don't expect it to. I expect Bobo to come in and win that job. There's a reason why the last two coaching staffs have both loved him. That's his work ethic and what he does in practice and what his willingness to do the dirty work that no one else wants to do. I think that's not going to go away. But I could see the team letting Tyrone Broden push him and see what happens.
Interesting. Yeah, the other guys on the roster currently are John Reese Plumlee, started out as a quarterback, believe it or not, kind of a run pass option guy, smaller. Mm-hmm. Steven Sims, they picked up Montori Foster Jr., Tyrone Broden, you mentioned. Nate McCollum is the last guy on my list. So, the room at the back end is full currently, and those guys will be competing. But I really do think that fourth, the fifth spot, maybe the sixth, comes down to, Jake Bobo, Torrey Horton, Derek Young, Ricky White, Cody White's going to be in that. You'd mentioned Tyrone Broden as maybe a guy that can emerge from the undrafted ranks. So there's 4 or 5 guys that are competing for 2, maybe 3 spots on the outside. It's a fun room, but it's pretty inexperienced. I mean, at the top, there's no worries, but to me, it does fall off, even if you factor in Torrey Horton. I mean, the guy's a rookie, hasn't taken a snap in the NFL yet, and he's injured. So he's not even practicing right now. But, for me, if I'm going to be completely honest, this is one of the weaker position groups on the entire team. But I still think it works. I think it's effective because of the efficiency that's built into the scheme. It doesn't necessarily mean that that anybody in the NFL or across any fan base of any team is going to look at this list and be scared.
No, not. And that's why I was like, you don't replace a guy like DK Metcalf, because whether he was immature and pouty and problematic physically, defensive coordinators were scared of him. And they double teamed him like freaking crazy because they were scared
and
of him.
tried to play him physical the entire game. I mean, just beat the crap out of him, essentially.
Yeah. And like that was their game plan. And the Seahawks do not have a guy who can do those things. Maybe
and I still
Torrey
think
Horton
that's okay. There's many teams in the NFL, Keith, that do not have a DK Metcalf and do very well.
But most good teams have a definite number one who is a big physical fast guy. And I mean, that's the reason why, certain players have bounced around the league despite being really unproductive, like Amari Cooper, because teams are like, wow, we could use a big physical fast guy to piss off defensive coordinators. And so they'll go and spend too much money on him.
Like Aurora for a certain amount of those kind of physical challenge matchups, if you will.
He's a tight end, but man, he's got the speed and athleticism and the size to really challenge teams. He's going to be a fun player, I think.
Yeah. So sometimes I think of him as in this room, like 10%. A little bit.
Yeah. So we kind of glossed over Steven Sims, but he's 28. He's got, 4 full leagues or years in this league. They didn't sign him to be a camp body. They're looking at him as a guy who might make this team. And if they weren't, he wouldn't have signed with Seattle and they wouldn't have signed him. Guy's good in special teams. I know I keep saying that, but again, if you're going to be the 6th wide receiver, you better be able to do it. Punt returns, kick returns, he can do those things. Good at getting downfield on punt coverage and making tackles. And that's kind of where you got to look at some of these guys and be like, well, can they make an impact there? Because that's how you get on the roster. Personally, I'm really intrigued by John Reese Plumlee, just because he was a quarterback at UCF and a good quarterback. Now, not a quarterback that's going to translate to the NFL because he's so run pass option. It's like a lot of zone read kind of stuff that just doesn't translate well. And he never really had the arm to be an NFL quarterback. But it takes a lot of smarts to play high level college football at quarterback and a good football knowledge. And that's what he had. And so you translate that to wide receiver and some of the things that, teams love to do with option routes and that kind of stuff. It pays to have that kind of encyclopedic knowledge of the way coverage works.
The crazy thing though is, Keith, is we've never even seen him take a snap or even receive a ball in practice or anything. I mean, this guy is like just changed positions over the winter, essentially. And now he's a wide receiver and he's being asked to compete against these guys who've been playing the position for, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 seasons already. Even if they're rookies, they've been playing football for a long time. It'll be very interested. I'd be very interested to see how he is able to compete. I think his largest hope is a practice squad situation, but you never know. You just really never know. A guy comes out of the blue. He's got a skill set they covet, and he finds himself in some sort of weird special role, and he honestly makes some plays happen on the field, and there he is.
2 years ago, nobody would have suspected that Jake Bobo was going to make the roster, let alone be the team's third wide receiver, and do what he did. They're like, what? He was a 4.99. That's that's an offensive line slow, and he's a wide receiver. But the guy worked his ass off and showed that he was willing to do the dirty work that other people weren't, and found ways to get separation. And he made the roster, and now he's kind of a fan favorite. And sometimes you just need an opportunity, and you have to be ready and willing to take that opportunity. And guys like, Broden, who I talked about earlier, or Plumlee now, Ricky White, Drake Young, they're going to get this opportunity. And if they rise to the occasion, they could surprise the hell out of us. And I'm okay with that. I really am.
Yeah, this is a good roster to kind of have an opportunity at this position.
At this position group, this position group and the position group that they play against at practice every day.
For sure. All right. What's next, Keith? We do an interior offensive line? Something like that?
Yes, we are. Or actually, we're going to do offensive tackles first and then do the interior. At least that's how I've been doing my research. So whatever.
Okay. Very good. So that'll be the next one. And we'll keep going until we get all the way through, until I think these things end at somewhere in July. I think we've got a few other shows in between and so forth, but this will keep going up until the eve of training camp, and then we'll do some training camp stuff, and we'll be in it, be talking about games. And I think I'm looking forward to this season better than like maybe Russell Wilson's last season before the season started, where you thought, well, Russell Wilson's coming back off the finger. It'll be a good year and we'll have an opportunity. Isn't that right?
I mean, we thought that. But Wilson was broken by then, and it turned out it wasn't going to do it. I think this is the most excited I've been since the year that got derailed by Russell Wilson's finger.
Yeah.
They didn't have a backup quarterback, and they rushed Wilson back, and he was freaking awful because they rushed him back. And it was just, 3 games of crappy quarterback play with Wilson after 2 games without him. That was awful. And by then the season was dead. I was excited going into that year, but the injury really killed any chances. And I haven't been, expecting this, the Seahawks to be super competitive since.
It makes it nice when you know you've got a nearly number one defense in your pocket.
Yeah.
And you walk into a season with that to start.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I think that nationally people are missing with Seattle is just how good that defense is. It was so good for the last 9 games last year. Yeah. And I think it's only going to be better.
All right.
You add in Amore, you get Jones for the whole time.
Oh, I know.
It's going to be better.
Oh, it's going to be fantastic. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
Let's get out of here. Find Keith on Blue Sky and Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Find us on your favorite podcast platform and our YouTube channel. Leave a message for us. Those are always fun. And hit that subscribe button. That helps us out. Make sure we put out content year round. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.